Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Todd Milbrand. I am the Distribution Sales Manager here at Sangoma. If you're not familiar with Sangoma, which I'm pretty sure all of you are, but just in case you aren't, we've been around 35 plus years. We are publicly traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange, do about $150 million in sales per year, 400 employees spread out worldwide. When the world is not ending, those folks are actually in one of 15 offices, with some of us working from home. At the moment, I'd say 95% of us are working from home, and you're probably experiencing something similar. So today we're going to go over SIPStation and FAXStation, and I'm going to start with FAXStation. Right, I want to give you guys a quick overview of the different options out there. And then contrast those with FAXStation, how FAXStation is architected and priced, and why it is going to be the preferable solution over those competitors. And then we'll do the same thing with SIPStation as well. So to get started, you know, our biggest competitor, if you will, or what people are typically coming to us from, is regular analog lines, right? So the stuff that is coming from AT&T, from Verizon, and going right into your fax machine like it has for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm sorry, 30 to 40 years. Problem with analog lines, they work 100%, but they can get very, very expensive, especially now. When you go from having 8 phone lines to down to 1 or 2, they know you're keeping those 1 or 2 specifically for fax machines and or credit cards or security, and they want to get rid of all of that legacy equipment, the stuff that's been around for 100 years. And they keep telling the government, look, we're getting less and less customers. And so when you don't fully go away from them, that leaves a customer in a line showing the government like, hey, you need to keep this infrastructure in place. So they're not investing in the infrastructure, and they want to do everything they can to get you off of it. So then some people go, well, you know what, I'm just going to do faxing with SIP trunks, possibly use T38. And the problem there with faxing over SIP trunks is that a fax requires not only a real-time digit, a fax requires all of those tones. So if I were to fax my cell phone number right now and I'd hear those really bad tones, those really high-pitched things, a fax machine needs to hear every single piece of that, right? So right now, I'm talking to you guys. I've got a USB headset, which is like, I never use this. It's going over my Wi-Fi to my modem, out over the internet, over to here, over the internet again, to your computer screens, to your telephones. And we are constantly dropping packets, right? Just due to latency, jitter, the way things are routed over the public internet. And your brain is smart enough to actually take those drop packets and where things are missing and put it all together. So you have no idea that it's happening. With a fax machine is not as smart as you, at least most of you, or at least most of the people in my life. And anytime you have those drop packets, it can cause faxing to fail. So one of the ways in which the industry tried to fix that was with something called T38. And this was a protocol that was meant to make it more of a data type transmission, so it wouldn't have to worry about those real-time tones getting dropped. T38, one implementation of T38 is not going to work with another implementation of T38, and if you're on version X versus version Y, there's issues. So it really didn't solve the problem. It exasperated it, right? Especially because people find themselves going, hey, I'm trying to do this over SIP trunks. I'm using T38 like everyone says. But whether you're using T38 or you're doing an analog conversion using a gateway, you will find yourself having issues more often than not. So some people find themselves going, you know what, I'll use the cable company, right? I called cable company X. Cable company X is offering me really cheap service if I bundle in some phone service with it. And what they do is they give you a cable modem. They convert that over to analog, and they allow you to hook some analog phones up to it, as well as a fax machine. There's a couple issues here. One, that real-time digital to analog conversion has to happen on a very low-cost, low-powered device. It's still a SIP trunk. So even though it's going over coax cable, which is an analog technology, it's still SIP from the provider to the cable modem. And worst of all, when faxes fail and they send a tech out, or you call into a call center, they don't understand enough about that technology. They don't understand enough about telephony. And they certainly don't understand enough about digital networking in order to truly help you. They're going to go, signaling looks good, which, worked when it was 1989 and channel 30 was a little snowy. Does not work so much as far as fixing faxing issues if you're doing it through the cable company and one of their cable modems. Now, some people will actually look at, well, I'm going to put a fax server in. Maybe that will solve everything. And that may solve some things internally, right? So fax server is a very, very expensive dedicated piece of hardware that would go either in a data center or possibly, within your organization, telco closet, server room, etc. And you still need either SIP trunks or phone lines or T1 to come in there, and all of the issues there are still present. Either you're paying a lot of money for analog lines coming in, or you're going with SIP trunks and hoping that everything works. And I mean, going back to the SIP trunk scenario, I've been in this industry over 15 years. Honestly, if you had told me 15 years ago that I'd still be talking about fax, I would have laughed. For quite a long time at you. But in that 15 years, I've seen someone do everything what you would consider perfect as far as network management, as far as what they're using, and they go to send a fax or receive a fax and it fails after a single page. And for no rhyme or reason, I've seen people do things that should never work. Congested network, ridiculous numbers of fax machines, sending data before it gets to the fax machine over a microwave connection a mile or two away, and then doing a conversion with the cheapest gateway possible, and they can send 400 pages. It's a nightmare as to whether it's going to work or not. But putting in a fax server is not going to fix that. And if you are that serious about fax that you're even looking at putting in a fax server, well, we certainly have a solution for you. And then the last piece I want to talk about here before we go into what FAXStation does, how it works, and why it's the superior solution here is EFax. So EFax is similar to option one, analog. It works great. The big issue here is cost. Typically, an EFax provider is going to charge you per user, and then you cannot connect to a fax machine. So I talk to people daily where they say, you know what, I'm just going to rip off the Band-Aid and do EFax, and that works for me. But then you will have other people within an organization who, for me, even though I'm in the tech industry, I still kind of freeze up when I go to a fax machine, right? Do I got to dial a 9? Do I have to do this? What button do I hit? But for some people, the EFax piece, which to me is, I look at it and I'm like, boom, 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 I'm done. This is great. they get scared looking at something like that, just as I get scared looking at a fax machine, and they prefer it. And with FAXStation, you can do both, or do either of them separately, right? We don't care about the number of users if you're using the EFax portion. All we care about is the number of pages you're sending via fax, because this is a dedicated solution for that. This will work in low bandwidth situations. You don't have to worry about real-time transmission. You don't have to worry about latency, jitter, any of that. When I go to show you the architecture here momentarily, it'll make sense why. You don't have to worry about T38 compatibility issues between your fax machine and whoever you're sending receiving to. And best of all, you get one throat to choke, right? So if you're having an issue, you're not going to have the cable company blaming it on the fax machine or this with the network, or you're doing that. We're able to do a lot of diagnostics remotely, work with you, get things going if for some reason there was an issue. And with our architecture, I'm going to start with, if you guys can just imagine this left half here, this FAXStation appliance, the fax machine, that's not even there. So if you want to use our service, you can just go to our website, log in directly to our data center, and you can send and receive faxes right through that website. You can also actually make it so that if somebody sends you a fax, it just shows up to your email. And on our data center, we default it to 6 months of storage. You can go in and change it yourself down to as low as 1 day, which means after 1 day, we automatically delete it, or you can go up to a year. And if you need less than or more than that, you can engage us and we can work with you. But let me pop up the portal for you real quick. So fax.sipstation.com. And I'm going to log in here real quick. And this is where I can go. I can see all of the faxes I have access to. If I go over here, these little binoculars will give me a quick idea of what it is. If I go over to the PDF, I can actually click on it, get some detail, download it. And I can set it up so that these can go straight to my email or to a group email or whoever's email I want them to go to. And then if I want to send a fax, I can come up here to send new fax, get things filled out. I can drag and drop documents here. So if I want to take this, drag and drop it, upload it, put in the number I want to send it to, and I'm done. I can even choose what phone number I want or what fax number I want to send it from. And this is all permissions based, right? So typically the user is not going to be able to see this many fax numbers. They'll just see the 1 or 2 they have access to. But since I work for the manufacturer and I'm the one doing these webinars, they give me access to everything. And once that's chosen, I can go ahead and hit send, or maybe this is just the cover sheet. I can, if I don't have a cover sheet, fill this out select on and get one created right from here. Or I can just upload another file. And maybe I'm not sure which file I've just transferred, right? Because I'm going from full screen, I'm clicking and I'm dragging over here. And maybe it's named something weird. If I click on this little PDF icon, I can actually get a file preview. And, oh, look at that. It's a brochure on SIPStation, which we'll be talking about shortly. So I'm going to segue back to my slides here. So with FAXStation, you can do that if you want. You don't have to use the EFax, but we have folks that sign up just to use the EFax piece. We have folks that sign up just to use the piece where you would actually connect to a fax machine, which is what I'm going to talk about right now. Our FAXStation appliance, what it does is it emulates the fax machine on the other side here. And we actually developed this because, and I still don't know the reason, but oil rigs in the middle of the ocean pumping oil have a need to fax. And it's not very easy. Actually, it's downright impossible to get an analog line or any other sort of line out there so that you can fax. So we developed this so that FAXStation, when it would go across the internet, securely transferred. My apologies, everyone. One moment. And I'm sure all of you have experienced something similar lately, the pitfalls of working from home and doing presentations and meetings like this between dogs and kids. And I feel bad if you have both like me, especially like me if you have a teenager. The teenager is definitely worse than a young kid. But anyways, my apologies. Where were we? All right, so FAXStation, when it securely transfers everything to our data center, doesn't care what this internet connection is. Since it's a data transfer, there's no need for those tones to be real time, like a fax needs. Those real time tones get transmitted here, and then gets sent to our data center. And once the entire file is there and ready to go, our data center then emulates a fax machine to the fax machine it's going to send it to. And it works in reverse too. So if I'm sending you a fax, it comes in. Once it's fully in our data center, it's going to get securely transferred over that internet connection. Once it is fully on the appliance, it will then call the fax machine on site and deliver it fully to you. So here's some information on how we actually sell the product. So instead of users, what we care about is the number of pages. We do not care if you have lots of users, one user. We care how many pages are you doing. And obviously, if you go with a 3-year contract, you get a little bit of savings, but still at $24.99 compared to the other services out there, it's already very well priced within the marketplace. If you've got a customer who refuses to email you a PO and they send you huge POs twice a month, and that's all you're doing with faxing, we have something even lower cost with our 150-page low volume faxing trunk at $9.95, but because it's so low, we don't offer any contract discounts. Now, if all you're doing with us is EFax, you're going to fax.SIPStation.com like I had shown you. We don't care how many users. Again, we only care about the number of pages. And in the first scenario, if you have 1,000 users who are going to check and possibly send the occasional fax, but it's less than 150 pages per month, you can do 150 pages per month. You cannot stack those together though, right? So you cannot get 2 of them and have 300 pages available to you. If you want to be able to stack lots and lots of pages together, that would be done with the high volume faxing trunks. And in that scenario, 2 users or 2,000 or 20, however many you want to set up, if they get 5 of them, they can use 15,000 pages. So what if you're just going to do fax machine and or some people are going to use the fax machine, some people are going to use EFax. Well, that device I was telling you about, the one that emulates a fax machine, it has 4 ports. And if you were to connect in a scenario 4 fax machines to it, each machine needs service attached to it, and each machine needs a DID. If those 4 machines aren't doing much as far as faxing, and 150 works for both. You can get four low volume faxing trunks. They're not going to be stacked together. Each machine would only have access to 150 pages a month. You can go over, there's overage charges, but it wouldn't give you, in this case, 600 pages total for your account. It would give you 150 pages per fax machine and or number. Same scenario, we've got 4 ports, 4 fax machines, but we put together 4 of the high volume trunks. That's going to give you 12,000 pages for the account. Doesn't matter if 11,999 are on one machine and there's 1 page on another. And I just realized I didn't mention this. If you're wondering, I'm talking pages in and out. So 3,000 pages, we don't care if it's inbound, outbound, it's 3,000 pages. If you need more than 4, you can stack multiple units together. And if you only have 1 fax machine, you're still going to get a device for the same price that supports up to 4 for growth. But if that 1 fax machine or your account needs to do, say, 10,000 pages, then we would look at you getting 4 of those high volume trunks, giving you 12,000 pages total. All right, so I'm going to take a quick second here to look at the questions pane before we get into SIPStation. Does fax data get stored in your infrastructure, or is it just a pass-through? It does get stored in our infrastructure, but as I don't know if this came in before or after I'd mentioned it. You can choose to store it for 1 day, which we do not recommend you go that low, but some people want to. That can be problematic if you have a device on site. So if you have a device on site and you have it set to delete after 1 day, somebody unplugs the power, somebody kicks out the internet power, or cable company's internet's not working. We've all experienced that. If you don't go in and get it from the data center, you forget about that, and this doesn't come up for over 24 hours, it's going to be deleted here. Because even though it was never transferred over to the appliance, you have it set to delete after 24 hours. And again, if you need to go lower than that, you can engage us. Somebody will probably do what I just did, encouraging you not to do that, but we can do that. Then I'm also being asked, is there a way to stop incoming FAXStation faxes from printing automatically? No, since once, you know, it's no different. You couldn't do it with your analog line, right? What you can do there is if there's specific people, users, or things you want to keep from going over and being printed. I'm going to assume the concern here, since a lot of multifunction printers from larger companies, you know, they sell them too cheap, but where they make their money is, you know, how many pages you print and charging you for the ink and all that. Is avoiding those coming through, is maybe just get an additional DID specifically for those. So when you know it's going to be 200 pages, it just goes into our data center and maybe gets emailed to someone as opposed to actually printing. Can you have incoming faxes go to fax and email? You can. So you can make it so it would still go to the fax machine. So maybe if you want to send things to a particular department, you can set it up so, you know, this particular DID or phone number, you're going to get delivered here, but then I also want those faxes emailed to this distribution list. All right, so it looks like it's it for questions on FAXStation. Let's actually get into FAXStation's younger sibling, SIPStation. So SIPStation is our SIP trunking service. In order to get started, you need at least one trunk from us. That trunk will give you 3,000 minutes inbound and outbound, lower 48 US states, or lower 48 US, I believe parts of Alaska and most of Canada. Each trunk will get you a bidirectional call path. So just think of it like the phone line you used to have, that analog one. You can make a call or receive a call on it. So a quick example, if you had 10 trunks from us, that would give you 30,000 minutes. And you can either have 10 inbound calls, 10 outbound calls going on, or a combination in between those, right? 9 and 1, 8 and 2, et cetera, et cetera. And you need at least one phone number from us. So you can have one phone number and 100 trunks. And I've seen people with 100 phone numbers in one trunk. It all depends on how you want to do your call routing with your PBX. So SIPStation, similar in pricing to what you would see with the high volume stuff with FAXStation. So month to month at $24.99, going down to $19.99 on a 3-year contract. You do need to have at least 3 trunks with us. $1 per DID. You can do SMS and texting right from either user control panel or Zulu within PBXact and FreePBX. One thing I want to point out here is it's $1.50 per month for an 800 phone number. If you have one now, you can port that over. Inbound on those lines is 2.4 cents a minute. And if we come back here, let's just use this 10 trunk example, right? So there's 10 inbound trunks. That does not limit you to 10 inbound calls on an 800 number. If you were paying for an 800 number and you were paying the 2.4 cents per minute on behalf of your customer calling in, you can have as many phone calls coming in on that 1-800 number as your system will support. So if you purchase 10, but you've got 40 people calling in the 800 number, it doesn't count against your trunk usage at all, and all 40 of those calls will come in as long as you have the bandwidth and phone system to support it. It's 1 cent per message inbound, outbound if you're doing texting. It does support MMS. You do need to make sure that the phone number you're either currently have porting over or you're selecting through our store supports SMS. And then T38 faxing, which, you know, you're probably thinking to yourself, Todd, you know, if you go back some slides, or remember you're talking about T38 faxing not being so great. It's not one of the things we do try to do. It's not 100% like FAXStation, but it's the best, in our opinion, T38 faxing out there because we use the same data center. So you would have this. Imagine this is your phone system, and we're eliminating a lot of that T38 problems by actually using our data center to negotiate to whatever T38 your PBX and your fax machine is set up for. Went too far there. So what makes SIPStation different, besides the fact that it's from us? Trunk groups. So if you have multiple locations across the country, maybe they are busy at different times. Instead of buying 5 trunks for one and 5 trunks for the other for a total of 10, you can reduce your telecom spend by going down to 6 or 7, depending upon what call volumes look like across all of that. Again, with the T38 faxing, it's best effort. It's not 100% like FAXStation, but we do have that dedicated data center. SIPStation, if you ever have played around with the module within FreePBX or PBXact, or just gone to SIPStation.com, we have extensive failover options. We can get granular and say, hey, if you cannot deliver to Todd's direct number, go to his cell phone. hey, if we cannot deliver to this IP address, which is where the PBX resides, or this fully qualified domain name, I want you to go here, or we can do a global failover to send things elsewhere, whether it's a PBX at a different location, whether it's an answering service, what have you. If to stick with the 10 as far as a example, since I've been using that all along now. If you're worried, hey, occasionally we may go to 11 or 12 calls. It happens like once a month. Do I have to pay for 2 extra trunks? You don't. Another way we try to keep the spend down for you is allowing what's known as bursting. So if you were to go above that once or twice a month, I believe it's 2.9 cents a minute outbound and 1.9 cents a minute inbound. So if you get a phone call, even if it's an hour, you're paying pennies over the course of 60 minutes versus paying for a whole nother trunk. And then we do have some built-in fraud guard. We've got another one of these on April 1st, where I'm going to go over VoIP security. One of the things you'll learn is all security, whether it's voice over IP or your data network, it's layers, and it's protecting both the applications and the devices. And one of the things we have within PBXact and FreePBX is a built-in fraud guard, where we cap how much international phone calls can go out, because typically that is where we see toll fraud. And we'll go over on April 1st a little bit more as to why they're trying to do that. But we limit it to $5 per week in international phone calls. You can log into SIPStation and take that up to 10. And if your organization does more than that per week, you can open a ticket, and we're going to verify all that and still have a limit on there to protect you. Nobody wants to get $5,000 phone bills, and it happens. So another thing that makes SIPStation unique is how we have actually architected our solution. Typical SIP provider has got their own infrastructure that the phone calls traverse through, right? So your PBX, your phone, whatever, goes over the internet, it goes to the provider's infrastructure, probably, whatever's closest to you geographically, or if they're in failover mode somewhere else, but it goes through their infrastructure, which adds additional latency from having to go through so many places. Part of the reason they're doing this is they want to use what's known as least cost routing. So to make it most profitable, they're going to have their switch and their infrastructure programmed to go, oh, that's the cheapest way to deliver a call from here to here. And usually the cheapest way is not the best sounding way. And lastly, it provides a choke point, right? Too many phone calls start going through. They're having issues with their provider, their internet, their upstream carriers, whoever. It can lead to bad sounding phone calls, frustration within your organization, because you just want it to work. And in the 4 years that I've worked here at Sangoma, there have been only a handful of times I've heard somebody tell me that the sound quality on SIPStation was anything other than excellent. And usually in those cases, it can be attributed to something like, hey, I'm using DSL, which if you're not familiar with DSL, it goes over analog lines and it's high latency, high jitter. Or, hey, my kid was running this was a few years ago, a Minecraft server with hundreds of people on it, just stuff like that. It was not related to the way our service was architected, right? So I want you to close your eyes, because you're probably wondering, if you're looking at my screen, what the closest pop is, right? And I'm not talking soda like Coke or Pepsi. It stands for point of presence. And if you can imagine, you've seen these everywhere. They're just a part of the daily fabric of our lives. The blah building that where AT&T or Verizon had their infrastructure, that building is still in use today. Usually it's big. They're all the same color brick. That stuff is still being used, obviously in different capacities because you don't have huge mechanical switches in there. But the way we architected our system was so that your PBX or your device or whatever goes out over the internet and goes to that building closest to you, reducing latency, reducing the chance for things to get messed up over the public internet. And we use that infrastructure from those legacy providers to go to the closest POP to wherever you're calling at the other end of the phone call. This allows us to, one, not create a choke point in our infrastructure. Two, we have priced the service that allows us to give you something high quality that just works without having to worry about us choosing or our equipment choosing to go the cheapest way. And three, it never goes through any of our infrastructure, right? And doesn't go through any additional equipment. So this allows for a great sounding phone call at a great price. So at this point, I am going to bring up the Q&A and answer some additional questions for you guys. How can I access the other webinars? I think I missed one on security methods for remote phones. That one is actually being held on April 1st. But if you missed any of these webinars, if you go to our YouTube channel, they're going to be there. Okay, let me look through these. Oh, looks like somebody had a FAXStation question. Are these solutions HIPAA compliant? Will you sign a BAA? Neither of these solutions are HIPAA compliant. We take every precaution available. We used to choose not to go through the HIPAA compliance, and it's something we're exploring now. I think previously, we're all FreePBX and PBXact folks on here. There was some nerdiness to us, right? They just said, you know what, a phone system really can't be HIPAA compliant, right? Because HIPAA compliance is more about usage. And if we spend all this money, we get HIPAA compliant, you give people a false sense of compliancy, and that doesn't stop a doctor, a nurse, a PA, whoever, from listening to a work email or work voicemail that came in via their email over Bluetooth and stuck in traffic with the windows open, right? And kind of a similar feeling as it related to FAXStation. We're looking into it. We'll sign a BAA, but this is kind of ambiguous, but it needs to be bigger, right? But a medical facility that wants to do the 995, 150 pages, wants a BAA, we're not going to sign that. But we will look into it, and feel free to reach out to us, and we'll address that. I wish we had something a little less ambiguous, but we don't. Are there any plans to open up SMS messaging from Zulu with any other providers other than SIPStation? Not at the current time, not that I'm aware of. That roadmap is always changing. I think something may be coming with VoIP Innovations, who's been a part of our company for quite a while now. But I've heard different things, but nothing definitive at this point. All right, so Pete, your question about selling in the UK, but having clients all over the world and what the pricing would be, reach out to, I believe it's Lauren Ruff in the UK, handles that, or whoever your channel account manager is in the US, or I'm sorry, in the UK. They would have better information on that, but I know here in the US, it would all be in US dollars if you were a US reseller. but check with them and see what they can do for you there. Can you use the new API with any of the tools you described today? No. So if you're not familiar with our new API with FreePBX and what's going to be coming with PBXact when we move to version 15, so SIPStation is still going to be in the SIPStation module, which I do not believe has an API written to it. And the FAXStation stuff, same thing. But if you are looking to develop around our new GraphQL API stuff, people are gonna have access to most of the modules, and as we go into version 16, 17, etc., more and more of those modules will get opened up, and the API will continue to get refined. So let me just mentally mark who I need to contact in my head about the SBCs. I'm going to give it one more moment here for any more questions that come in. I want to thank you for your patience as I ran to get a USB headset. Ironically, it's like a $25 one I've had for 12 years, and it was in, and I'm sure every gentleman on this call has a bag of wires in their basement or somewhere else in their house. I keep mine in my bag of wires, which it's crazy how often those do actually come in handy, having weird cables from over the years. And I want to thank you for your patience with Layla here barking at the mailman. We are all, as we go through what we are going through here in this country, going to experience that on calls and webinars and video calls, etc. So I've not seen any additional questions come through. So I'm going to wrap this up. Again, April 1st, I'm going to be going over SBCs and voice over IP security. And for Ron, who's looks like he has some immediate needs and questions, I will be reaching out to you here shortly. Thank you everyone for your time, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and rest of your week.